folks. It's your friend Ashton, and welcome to the Rooted Rebellion podcast, the show that's reshaping the food system from the ground up. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Rooted Rebellion podcast. However you are choosing to tune in today, thank you so much for your time, and welcome to the conversation. Today, we're all in for a treat. For this episode, I am joined by author and earth-centered psychotherapist, Julie Brams. Julie is a certified forest therapy guide and meditation practitioner. She has been a writer in Los Angeles for 30 years, and her psychotherapy practice integrates traditional therapy, ecopsychology, meditation, and the latest advances in the field of neuropsychology. Today we'll be discussing her book, The Nature Embedded Mind, Reclaiming Our Place in Our Living Earth. And folks, I've got to tell you, I am excited for this one. In this book, Julie sets out to answer the question, what if the root of our personal and planetary suffering is connected? It's powerful and inspiring, and it invites us to unlearn the modern myth that we are separate from the rest of nature. She weaves science, story, and lived experience into a compelling call to remember who we really are. Beings of Earth, born into relationship with all life. And as you tune in today, I'm going to encourage you to leave behind what you think you know about our relationship with the rest of the natural world. Here to discuss the nature embedded mind is Julie Brams. Julie, hello and welcome to the Rooted Rebellion podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing good. Very good. Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm a little jazzed up right now. I don't think I've been this excited about a piece of nonfiction since my undergrad days.
Right.
So, yes, so let's set the bar high immediately.
Yeah. Good.
Yes, I was an environmental studies minor in college. That was one of the courses of study that I created. And let me tell you how I would have benefited from this piece of work in those days. So we're here tonight to discuss the nature embedded mind, how the way we think can heal our planet and ourselves. And let me tell you, folks, you're in for a trip because we're going to challenge some conventional thoughts here, and I think we're all going to be better for it. So, Julie, kick us off. What events in your life inspired you to write this book and consider these paradigm shifting concepts?
Yeah. Thank you. Let's see. Well, I like to say that, where it all started is, as a little girl in love with the planet, in love with the rest of nature and being out of doors and feeling that natural kinship that I think so many of us do feel for nature. I mean, I have changed my language now, and you'll notice that I will say the rest of nature to start helping myself and anyone else make the shift ideologically back into the reality that we are nature as well, that we're not separate from nature, but that we are nature herself in the form that we're in. So, that was sort of always in my heart and soul. And then becoming a mental health professional, I've been a clinician for 34 years now. And, spending my time really like deeply curious about human potential, consciousness, what causes suffering, and most importantly, what relieves suffering. So kind of diving into why do people do the harmful things that we do. Um, and through other kinds of serpentine maneuvers around mindfulness meditation, um, somatic experiencing, and then finally arriving at a method of nature therapy that really opened this up in a very particular way for me and showed me a reliable how to change these concepts that we are conditioned to believe. And, really we have to be trained away from our natural mind, our natural way of being, in order to fit in with modern society or, just in general Western civilization. So, you know, that's a beginning to the answer. I think it's again, it's very simple. It's something that I think people, when they hear it, it tends to spark something intuitive about, "Well, yeah, I know that's true." And then as we unpeel what keeps us separate from nature, what keeps us behaving as if we are separate from nature, and then how do we reroute, or what I've been now calling rerouting, our mind back into right relationship, because our bodies can never be outside of nature. Our bodies are not separate from the planet. It's just our mind or our thinking that is trained to separate itself.
So, what does it mean to have a nature embedded mind?
The way I think about it is, again, similarly to what I'm beginning to uncover as we're talking, the nature embedded mind, I would say, is a mind, our own personal mind, that is reconnected to the embedded experience of being. I'm really trying to be careful with these words because our language continuously separates us. So we are part of nature, we are part of the earth, but honestly, we are nature and we are the earth. It's one being, it's one body, one consciousness that we are an important part of, but it's more of like you could think of it as a family or a system. Or in the book, I talk about uh, maybe understanding how your own body has different parts, but they don't function outside of each other, like your lungs and your heart. They're different, they have different purposes, but we would consider them, your body is one organism that needs those parts to do what they do, but you don't want to be without either one of them, and they're interrelated. So this is how I am drawing our attention back to the reality that that is true for humanity in terms of where we sit in relationship with the other species that we co-create Earth with. So the nature embedded mind is one that operates in unison or in harmony, rather than an unembedded mind or a disconnected mind functions on anthropocentrism, which takes human beings and says they're separate from the rest of nature, they're superior to. So then there's an artificial ranking system that humans rise to the top of. And if we're at the top of, we can dominate and then exploit and extract from the rest of nature as if that's not going to do anything harmful. So those are the two paradigms that I'm sort of pointing to, the one that's artificially implanted which is a hierarchical paradigm, and the one that we're born with and that is most sustainable, and the way that all of our ancestors lived at one point in time, which is functioning in like Thich Nhat Hanh uses the word interbeing or interconnectedness, that we function together in a system.
I think it is so easy as a child to live outside those paradigms before we have had these constructs placed on us. You even mentioned that, you felt innately called to kinship with the rest of nature. What's your earliest memory of experiencing that? And do you recall a time when you started to pick up on this narrative that we're separate, that maybe the rest of the world was trying to push onto you?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a good point, what you're saying. And it's worth saying again that all of us have to be trained away from reality. All of us as children, we are living in what I'm calling a nature embedded mind. And then we have to be trained away and taught not to do that. And at this point in history, we tend to use shame, humiliation, ridicule to keep people from talking about their bond with other than humans, except for the ones that we've decided are okay, like dogs, cats, our pets. Um, so as a child, like this is hard to pinpoint because it isn't like an off on switch. It's just slowly we learn what we shouldn't say out loud, or what we shouldn't validate that we actually can do. Um, for whatever reason, the story came up when you asked about my childhood. It's a story of when I was very little. I must have been maybe 2 or 3, like very little. And I just remember we were living in a house at the time, and there were ants coming around the fireplace, like a stream of ants. And for whatever reason, I can't ask her because she's no longer here, my grandmother had a paper bag and she was picking up the ants and squishing them and putting them.
That's not where
Exactly.
I thought the story was going.
No. But I had that same reaction as you did, even though I was 2. I was like, why are we doing this? Like, I don't understand. And she's like, because we need to get rid of the ants. Okay, first of all, that's not the way to do it. But my grandmother was my grandmother. And I remember saying to her, why do we have to kill them? Like, that felt very weird to me. Like, why would we kill this little ant? It's so apparent, obviously not harming, it just didn't make any sense to me. And she said, well, if we don't kill them, then they'll crawl out of the bag. So I was like,
Now
okay,
that is almost something from a Stephen King novel. I
isn't
don't know
that
why
weird?
that really
Maybe
unsettles.
we'll pick a different story, but this is the story. And so I remember like letting the ant crawl on my finger, wouldn't kill it, put it in the bag and let it crawl out. Like, so I guess what came up for me as you asked is this kind of innate knowing and not buying into a system where I felt that it made sense to dominate or to get rid of ants that way, or the more I saw what, and I don't want to throw my grandmother under the bus, she just whatever, but the more I saw this Western civilization, this culture that did do things that I just as a child thought did not make any sense, the more I leaned toward other cultures to teach me and to guide me, and cultures that supported more of what felt natural to me. So, like Native American, I'm in the United States, as you are as well. So, First Nations people were a big guide for me here to look at how does a culture that is staying embedded, staying connected to Earth, how do they operate, as a way for me to maybe fake being part of Western civilization, but not have to fully buy in.
A clever disguise. There's
A
memory
clever
in
disguise.
nature all the time.
Yeah, so
How much opposition have you faced from your fellow clinicians as you've gone on this journey that really, turns psychology and therapy on its head?
I know, that's an interesting one because right, there is a field of ecopsychology, or sometimes it's called deep ecology, or, different names that, again, I say in the book, it's been around for so long, yet it's not mainstream. It's still spell check. To this day, it'll be autocorrected, because it's not a common practice. So I'm not going to say like that there aren't therapists who embrace this, but what I'm wanting, and pushing for is that the entire field accepts that this is a core, you know, belief that needs to be repaired in order for the field to be ethical. That if we are continuing to operate under a system that doesn't address this very strange paradigm, uh, I think we're not able to fully serve people in mental health or any kind of health. And we're never going to be able to move that needle past the barrier of this framework. So I do get a lot of pushback because for a couple of reasons, I think. One is because I think people are very defensive of what they've done over time. It's really hard for anybody to correct a big mistake, you know? Um, I think that clinicians think that I'm saying we have to throw the whole profession out and start over again, which is not true at all. There's everything about the profession can stay as is if we have the correct foundation being corrected as well, taken seriously as a mental health issue, and remembering that we don't function well when we are in a paradigm that is telling us that we have to operate as if we're not part of our environment. It's very dysregulating to a human body and dysregulating to our mind, even though we can't really necessarily tell where the dysregulation is coming from until we look at this. Then once you see it, it's it's like an aha moment in a way that you can't unsee this glitch in the program. I also think that because people in general, our society is so anthropocentric or human centric, that clinicians place themselves as the therapist, the healer, the one that helps. And what I'm suggesting is a process of learning, as I did, to become a nature therapy guide, which allows nature to be the therapist. So, where the healing takes place in this kind of therapy is between a person and an other than human being. So, a person and a tree, or person and a river, the person and, a rock, or I'm picking strange things because, just to kind of be a little jarring. I think it's good to get a little confused because then our mind starts to go, wait, what? And that's a good place to be. Like the wait, what? I don't get it is a good place to be. because the therapists that I know that, again, use nature as part of their toolkit are still in this paradigm of extracting from the earth for human benefit and doesn't think of it as a reciprocal relationship more where you would be in the practice that I'm talking about, you're building a relationship so you don't take something from an other than human being without giving something as well. So it's like you said, it's really turning things on its head, but I would have to say we've been living on our head and this is putting us on our feet. So we will be standing on the ground again and not trying to walk upside down. It's that experience. So when we come back into reality and our feet are on the ground, the experience is, oh my gosh, this is so much easier.
Is really compelled in your book by the comparison that you draw between humans in contemporary society and animals captive in the zoo. And I really appreciate that analogy because it's something that I have thought previously that we are just so abstracted from our natural environment. But until you put it in terms as clearly as you do, you don't realize just how erratic our behavior becomes from this complete disorientation that we're living as a culture. So, can you please say some more to that point?
Yeah. Yeah. This is where I think part of it was bumping up against all the time people saying humans have always been violent. Humans always this. Humans, that's just human nature. That's just how people are. There's always going to be this war. There's always going to be all the things, all the ills. And for whatever reason, I just don't believe that. And then as I started to look systematically at this, it became very clear that it is most likely due to this civilization or this mental cage that we're in kind of a captivity or the quote unquote, tamed world, that this angst and cruelty um, comes from. A lot of our strange behavior, I think, comes from, yeah, not being in our natural, not just a natural environment, but our natural mind. I want to keep saying that because the most problematic part is what we think, so we could be out in the wilderness and still thinking in a way that is trapped. Um, although we do better. But yeah, so there's all kinds of studies, and we know this, of animals that are in captivity and how they don't behave the same as they do when they're out in the wild, when they're out free to do what they do naturally. They behave very differently. We see it in marine life, we see it in primates, we see it across the board. They behave, they're under stress. And so, yeah, our cage is, again, I'm saying it more in terms of our mind, uh, because we don't necessarily feel ourselves we're not locked up. I mean, we could go down that road and see all the dysfunction in a prison system. But just for our conversation, I want to keep pointing to this mental cage that we're in that causes us to feel lonely, to feel anxious, to feel depressed, to feel all kinds of things that then we have to figure out how to soothe that. And again, when we reroute, when we come back into right relationship, our nervous system drops a lot into a more regulated place that we don't even know is possible. Because we're always walking around a little dysregulated. And when you start to reroute, so, I've been doing this way of rerouting for about 9 years, maybe 10 years. Um, you feel it in your body. It's it's just different. It's calmer. It's different in a lot of ways, but I think even when people go on a short experience, like 3 hours with this kind of nature therapy, they'll rep most of the time, everyone reports feeling relaxed and, like, present in a certain way that they are surprised or that they don't remember since childhood, things like that. So, yeah, that's a long answer.
I'm right there with you, and it's something that I have experienced in my personal life. I'll give the example
Yeah.
of living on the farm in Montana. Anytime I do, I'm in a tent for months at a time. And I'm going to give the disclaimer, I'm not advocating for anyone to ever quit their medication cold turkey. However, that being said, I have done that on the farm accidentally, but was amazed to find that the anxiety medications that I had been on for years were obsolete in this natural environment, and they weren't needed. I weaned myself off simply because I had no desire to take those medications and no need. At the same time, I am curious about what you have to say about some of the more, I was about to say animalistic side, but I don't feel like that's a very fair comparison to draw. About, let's say, some of the more violent tendencies that exist in human nature. I recognize in your writing, you show the correlation between the emergence of civilization and some of these, we'll say, acts of violence or cruelty. I'm
Mhm,
curious, what do you think about certain animals we'll see in their natural habitat that still show territorial behavior
mhm,
or very clear acts of aggression? How does that differ from perhaps cruelty or what we might see from a human being in this more sterile, controlled environment?
mhm. Yeah, I mean, I know that's a question that is very magnetic. People ask that often. Um, on one hand, I wanna say, like, I don't know. I don't think we know. Like, we need to find out. Um, I am not claiming that there would be no violence. I'm not claiming anything. I'm just claiming that we're not in our right mind, So I feel like let's get back to our right mind, like our indigenous contemporaries do as our species. Like we can, talk about other species as well if we want to, but um, let's look back at how do our indigenous contemporaries handle conflict? Uh, how does nature handle self maintenance? I mean, I feel like it's a little bit like, okay, what would be the difference in the human species? That's discoverable. We need to not imagine it. We need to embody it to find out, because if we're imagining it, we're only playing a game, you know? I would say it will be more harmonious. Why would I say that? Because I look at the rest of nature and I see that reliably nature functions in a harmonious way. There is still death, there is still all kinds of things. I'm not trying to paint a picture of a utopia, but in general, it's about balance and it's about, um, I think about all the times that species are not violent. Most of the time, they give a warning. They give a warning. That they don't want to fight. They give a warning. And I think that because of what we're grappling with over 150 generations of forgetting maybe how to live in a better way, we have a tendency to jump to the fight. I don't know. I feel like it's not again, it's this stuff is it really is discoverable, and I don't want to claim that I'm an authority on what will it be. That's also part of a problematic thinking where there is some idea that someone is on top, someone has the answer, and everyone else is beneath them. So I think about my invitation is that we as humans, as Gloria Steinem would say, imagine ourselves linked, not ranked, and then include the other than human beings in the answer to that question. So if we're linked with each other and we're linked with the rest of nature, then how would human beings navigate territory or navigate food supply or all the things? I mean, I think there would be a lot of what I consider superfluous kinds of violence would be unnecessary if we were really doing this. Cruelty, I think, is a very human thing that doesn't land in the category of what other animals do or what other plants do. I don't know. I'm sure there'll be somebody, and it's okay, somebody that wants to say, oh no, actually this species is also cruel. I'm like, why champion cruelty? I don't get it. It's like, let's keep leaning into health and wholeness and harmony and sustainability. And again, we have the proof from centuries ago that civilizations that function in harmony or in relationship with the land do better. They sustain. They don't rise and fall. Like, this is history. Like, we don't have to make that up. That's true. I don't know.
Well, while we're on that point, would you care to shed some light on the different types of community that you bring up, the difference between tribes and city states, and what you mean when you say that some of these issues began with civilization? I think that is a very jarring statement for most.
Yeah, yeah. I think, some of it is not my area of expertise. It's something that I did refer to that I learned from Tom Hartman in his book, The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight, which to me was another one of these like mind-blowing books to say, oh, yeah, there is historical evidence of these things and more of that expertise, which I don't have. I'm strictly kind of coming from the lane of psychology. I'm not a historian. I'm not a botanist. I'm not all the other things. But I will say that civilization, as we know it, Western civilization, kind of defines itself as separate from nature, superior to nature. And again, this ranking system. Then you see how we've gone even further to divide. Okay, humans are above, but above in the human little lane is white is now supposedly above, and male is supposedly above, and straight. I mean, like, it's all crazy. It's just a mind game, just in terms of superiority. It doesn't make any sense. Like, the rest of nature doesn't rank itself. What's more important, the bee or the flower, the soil or the grass? Like, why would you do that? It's like it's such a strange phenomenon. But this is what our civilization does. And again, it allows atrocities because once you can say that human beings are better than the rest of nature, you can say we can destroy it. It's not animate. It's only here for us. We can do whatever we want to it. And we get atrocities.
Things
Okay, if we deanimate the world and turn it into objects, then we can also say, oh, these people are like animals, and therefore we can do whatever we want to them because they're animals. It's again, the atrocity and the certain cruelties are stemming from this, objectification and deanimating life, which again, it's so fascinating to me that science itself, which was the thing that that tore us out of the earth, now is bringing us back. Oh, guess what? Plants do know when you're around. Oh, guess what? All these beings are sentient. Oh, guess what? It's like, it's so funny to me because even the thing that tore us out brings us back to reality, which is it's all conscious. It's not human, but it's all conscious. It's the other than human beings are very aware of us. And I'm going to say, love us.
Okay,
Just,
let's take a
yeah.
second to dip our toes in the water
Okay.
here
Okay.
because I'm all on board for this. I'm sure
Okay.
you're familiar with the term panpsychism.
Yes.
Could you please share with our listeners who are unfamiliar this concept that consciousness exists in more than human beings?
Yeah. I kind of want to say it in the simplest way that we all agree to allow ourselves to know. Like your dog. Now there are some people that will say a dog doesn't have any feelings. All right. But most people who have relationship with dogs understand that their dogs are conscious. They understand how to communicate. They know what they need because they let you know what they need. And we learn how to interpret what they're saying. They're not speaking English, but or whatever our language is, but they're communicating and we get it. They know what's going on with us. If we're sad or something, they come over. They're very aware, right? So most people will admit that that species has consciousness. And then we go down the line. And again, with science coming right along to show us that even plants can have optical receptors, even though they don't have eyes, that they know that we're there, that they can see in a certain way, right? There's consciousness, there's intelligence. It's not a human experience, but it's a conscious experience. We notice our plants turning toward the light. We notice, I would like to say, if we're communicating with them, we might notice things like the leaves are drooping. We interpret that as a signal of something that that plant has a need. We can attune to that need and then check it out. Does it need water? We're maybe touching the soil, feeling the dryness, and say, yes, it needs water. We bring water to it, the leaves perk up. We feel like, yay, we had a good conversation there, you know? So again, I think, and it's a stretch. It's a stretch for my mind too. But to be able to question, why would it be some species have consciousness and not all of them? Where did that come from? Prior to this implanted thought that human beings are the only conscious beings, our ancestors understood that all things were animate, that the world was animate. animism was how we related to all things. So, like, our track record as a species has been much more time in an animated world, in a conscious world, and learning how to communicate with different consciousnesses. And when I'm saying communicating, I don't mean just verbally, I mean sensorily, communicating through touch, communicating through sight, communicating through sound. Like, we're in communication all the time. It's letting ourselves see it without shame. Again, we're trained to start to feel shame about that. Like, I have people say to me, "You're gonna think I'm crazy," but I'm like, "I am not gonna think you're crazy. I see that you are sane." You know, I had a experience with rushing water, and I suddenly felt such and such, and this I understood something. Like, yes, of course, the water spoke to you. I mean, again, it's like we have to give ourselves a break and play a little and suspend our disbelief and then remember, like what you were saying, what we knew as children. How did we get along with the other than humans? I don't know, did that answer the question or just take us down a rabbit hole? I'm not
Oh,
sure.
oh, that was right on the money. And
Okay.
it brought up the thought to me that I know so many would challenge this question of consciousness. They want to get
Mm,
really reductive.
mm,
Um, you know, not to throw them under the bus. In college, I lived with two science majors and a fellow English major. I always noted that the difference between us is that the science majors wanted to know how a tree grew, how and why. And my roommate and I, the English major, just wanted to talk about how the tree made us feel.
mm.
And I think the argument that I heard most and continue to hear the most is that that's not consciousness, that's a response to stimuli. And it takes my mind to the idea, the concept of galvanism,
Mhm.
where we're just animating tissue. Well, there is electricity causing that to move. And yes, I would agree that's a response to stimulus. However, who is animating these plants? Who or what? Where is their animation coming
Right.
from? And could we not just extend that same argument to ourselves? Well, anything we do, this conversation back and forth is just a response to one another.
Exactly. And yeah, and this is kind of a new way that I've been thinking about it, and it's a little harsh, but I kinda wanna float it by you anyway.
Please.
Yeah, because I think that this how and why does it, and it's a response to stimulus, which again, you can see how that leads to cruelties and atrocities and experiments on anything, including other humans, to see how does it respond to certain stimulus. Like, it gets very horror show. Um, the thing that I've been thinking about, because I have deep, deep, deep compassion for us, and I have a lot of faith in our nature, in spite of all of it. Um, and I think about, like, that mindset that reduces things to stimulus and response and that kind of thing. I feel like that thinking creates a situation where humanity is living through vivisection. This is how much we're suffering because we cannot be reduced to just electrical stimulations and, we cannot. We can only be kind of tortured with a quality of dissecting us while we're still alive. I think that's the kind of pain we're under. So, again, also not to throw your roommates under the bus, it's a very brutal way of approaching life. to reduce it, to reduce all of us to how do we, why do we, what happens if I cut this part out? Ugh. You know? Like, let's come back. Like, I think this is what I'm hoping for, is that we are on the tail end of that, and that we're coming back to life, that we're coming back to wholeness, that we're coming back to reanimating ourselves and the planet in such a way that we walk with reverence, and we walk with joy, and we walk with respect, and we walk with many other things that I think we could probably rediscover, attitudes and emotions that we can rediscover.
Let's talk about what this healing looks like on a practical level. So, maybe for some of the clinicians who are listening, what does this look like in application with patients or with someone who is seeking it for themselves?
Yeah. So, okay. Um, and so for whomever, but particularly clinicians, would need to get some sort of certification. I promote this particular type of nature therapy that was developed by Amos Clifford because, as a scientist, I wanted to find something that had some standardization, some repeatability, some, cross cultural, cross everything. Um, Capacity. So I recommend this kind, but any clinician that wants to engage in this has to learn the difference between being the therapist and being the guide, and how to step out of the ego and letting the rest of nature be the source of therapy. But for everybody, so all of us, um, again, if it's the type of therapy that I'm talking about, it's a simpleness of going out of doors, connecting with your senses. What does this place sound like? What does this place smell like? What does this place feel like? So we're going through the senses and including ourselves. So one invitation might be, if it's what does this place sound like? What's the furthest sound you can hear? That's again elongating our sense of hearing. So we're tuning in now to what's farthest away. What's the closest sound? Is there a melody? Is there a rhythm? And people who spend time in nature will clock this and go, yeah, of course I get that. That happens quite naturally. Like you already have that. The land perks you up and you notice, oh wow, there's a tuck, 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 Is that a woodpecker? Is it a crow? Like, you start to hear, is this a I was at Malibu Creek, which is near me, and I had never heard the sound, and I was like, "How is there a donkey in the creek?"
Yeah.
And I asked the park rangers were going by, and I was like, What is that? What is that sound?" And they're like, "Oh, that's a bullfrog." I was like, "Oh, I didn't know. It sounded like a donkey." But
Wow.
anyway, it's like life wants to engage us. Um, so it's kind of tuning in that way, playfully, and stepping out of been there, done that mind. And then also noticing your own sound. So this is again allowing people to have that embeddedness. Not only am I here, but it's not a TV show, it's not a movie, it's not on my device. I'm actually here too, and I'm making sound. So maybe it's the sound of your own breath that you hear, or maybe if you feel like it, you vocalize something. Maybe you sing back to the bird that's singing. Maybe you make some kind of rhythmic contribution. So it's a process of noticing how our body responds to the environment, and noticing that our body is also contributing to the soundscape. We're being seen as well as seeing. We're being felt. It's kind of fun to play with. Like maybe I'm feeling the leaves on a tree, but the leaf is feeling my hand. So it's bringing relationship back in. And then how do I want to be in relationship? you know? So I prefer to be gentle. I don't know, it's not the only way to be, but I prefer to be gentle. It makes me feel very tender towards everything. And I think, okay, wouldn't that be an interesting society? With all of our technology, we're not going backward in time, but if we reinvest in what arises naturally as a human being, tenderness and technology, what would that be like? I feel like, again, I went on a little rabbit hole, but I hope that was an answer of how to begin it. And it's a relationship, so it's not a one-shot deal. It's like any relationship that you want to have with anyone, you need to spend time with them, you need to be interested in them, you need to tell them about yourself in whatever way, you need to hear about them. Otherwise, you don't have a real relationship with someone. You just like kind of parallel. This is what happened to us, right? Now we walk around on screens and nobody makes eye contact. So relationship requires that contact, eye contact with another animal or eye contact with the tree or the river, time spent repeatedly, and then you get to know more about this particular being or this particular place, and you know a lot more about yourself. You learn from the others what it means to be human through them.
Well, let me ask you this in regards to relationship.
Mhm.
How do we help others have a relationship with the rest of nature without assuming this tremendous amount of anxiety and guilt that comes with the burden of knowing the wrongs we've committed?
You know, I got a few different thoughts coming to my mind.
Let's hear 'em.
Yeah, one of them is it's okay to feel that. It's important in a way to acknowledge um, what's being done, what's been done, what we do. It's okay to see our mistakes. It's important to see our mistakes. Joanna Macy, if you're familiar with or your listeners are familiar with, talks a lot about despair work. I think she rephrased it because it was a little bit tough for people to handle. But, a lot of times what does come up is some appropriate grief and sorrow. But again, it's to me the same way you would want to know if you had hurt a loved one. If somebody comes to you and says, you did XYZ and that really hurt. It doesn't feel good to hear that, but it's important to say, "Oh, I see that I did that, and I'm sorry, and I won't do it again." So some of it is important for us to allow ourselves to feel, for sure. The other answer that I wanna say, which I think is much, much more important than my answer, is finding out from the other than humans, what do they think about that? Bringing that to them. And again, it's suspending our disbelief and, for example, go sit with I keep using trees because they are such an important kin to us. It's just we grew up together, we co-evolved together, and so humans and trees are just good friends. If you bring oh my gosh, I'm feeling so much guilt and burden about what my species has done or what I've done or whatever the sorrow is, bringing that to your tree ally and listening to what the tree has to say to you about it and having the patience to wait. until you get something that you will understand is an answer about that. Sometimes you get answers from the other than humans that you might not even understand what did it tell you for months or years. Um, I if I could tell a little story, I don't know how.
Please,
Okay.
please.
So when I was first learning to do this type of nature therapy, I had a group of people that I took to the woods, and did all the invitations. Everything was going great. I had them go to do their final invitation, which was simply sitting, finding a spot, being drawn to a spot, and sit for 15, 20 minutes with the place, without an agenda other than to notice. And in this practice, we close with a tea ceremony, and we use um, something that's been harvested from the trail. So I think I had collected, we have California bay laurel leaves, which are amazing, beautiful. And so, had steeped the leaves, and I was setting up the area for us to have our tea ceremony, and that closes the practice. And then, okay. So as I was setting this up, two guys came. Gosh knows why they wanted to clump right where I was. I was off the trail on the side of the creek, out of the way, but they decided to come right straight through where I was, and they crossed the creek, disturbing a hornet nest. And because the guys just kind of trip, and went off, I was the only person there. And so the hornets went after me because they thought that I had done it. And I was stung multiple times. And if you know anything about them, they don't stop. It's not like a bee. They're not going to get stuck. They are designed to be able to sting repeatedly. Um, And so I don't even know how it was nothing that I knew to do, but I took the scarf that was on my neck, I took that off, I threw it, I took the outer shirt, I threw it, I went to the water, I was trying to I don't know what I thought I was doing, because it doesn't work. None of it works, by the way, but it happened to work that they all went after my scarf, and they all killed that scarf. When they were sure it was dead, they went back to their nest, and peaceful as can be. So I was like, I called my mentor, and I write about him in the book, Ben Page. He was like the best mentor. And I called him, and I'm like, I don't know. I think the forest hates me. It doesn't want me to be a guide. And he's like, I don't think that's what the message was. So it took me a while to kind of think, why did that happen? What was that? And as I sat with it over time, one of the things that came to me was understanding how swiftly these beings protected and then went back to peaceful tranquility. And I thought, okay, that's good. So you meet the need, you protect, and then you back to tranquility. And I thought, I will do that. That's going to be, something that I want to incorporate in the way I approach life. So I think it was a story where legitimately, I was like, I don't know what this means. I don't know, I could not figure out why that happened. But as I'm saying, if we allow ourselves to just continue to contemplate or to wonder, to be curious, the land has a lot of answers for us, including, look what we've done to this place. I'm so guilty. I'm so sad. I don't know what to do. The land has answers for each of us, and maybe collectively, but definitely for anyone who wants to ask.
That's chilling in the best of ways. What do you hope if people just have one takeaway from this book, what do you want it to be?
I guess what I would want it to be is that there's more hope than not, that nature is regenerative more than anything. When we see even destruction, nature comes back pretty quickly. And we are nature. So, again, if we can align with that part of ourselves, I think we can learn more about optimism, hope. I don't know. It feels like, to me, it feels very exciting. It feels very encouraging. It feels like, yeah, we made a mess, but the earth can clean it up pretty dang quick. And if we align with her, we can too, which sort of makes me think of what we were talking about your farm, which I don't know if you want to talk about, but how when we tend the land comes up. It wants to, it's natural, and we do too if we're with it, like such a great team.
And it is a team,
Yeah.
especially when we recognize that we're not separate or other. So, how are you helping others to realize that through your work with Elemental? Would you care to share with the listeners about that?
Yeah, I think again, I don't have an agenda. I think it's really important as a guide to not have an agenda, because that again is this authority over, or I'm doing something. It's like what I really am doing is helping people create their connection with the other than humans, have a place to share the excitement of that, to share the stories together, to encourage each other, um, and to discover with everyone, what are they discovering. Um, yeah, I think the biggest thing is trusting the rest of nature, you know? So it's not me, it's not a human being, but together finding our way back home, and knowing in my mind that the earth wants us back with her. She wants to help us feel better, behave better. So that's what I'm doing with Elemental, providing spaces for people to experience it, to experiment with it, to explore it, to share about it. Um, I think I was saying to you, I have the book study and rerouting cohort, which is more of a deep dive into the book, the concepts, but as I was saying to you, it's a cohort where everyone, including me, has a other than human study partner or study buddy. And so the cohort is people and other than humans together talking about, for lack of a better word, um, what it's like to be in relationship with each other. And of course, any questions. And again, like, I'm not coming from authority about it. I'm coming from, I've got some time under my belt. I could share what I know, but I want to know what other people find. It's so important to get out of this human, 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 human thing, because we're stuck. We don't know the answer. We can't know the answer. We're not supposed to know the answer. We're supposed to turn to a mountain, turn to the ocean, turn to one of the ancestors that knows a heck of a lot more than us about how to make this place healthy. It's like, it's silly.
And what about bringing this knowledge to others, helping them at least to consider these ideas for the first time? What about that makes you feel most rooted?
It's a full body experience. Like, I'm not exactly sure how to explain it, but helping someone retrieve this innate knowing. Because again, we're born with this. This is our birthright. And when someone gets it, and I can feel with them the joy and the liberation that they feel because of allowing this relationship with the rest of nature to be real for them. Um, it feels like it almost adds another piece to the puzzle, even in my own body. It's like, people talk about that word remembering as, you know, putting back together instead of dismembering, remembering. And it's something like that. So helping people step out of the cage and into this way of being, it feels like it restores me as well. It restores me and it restores, I know, it restores our earth. But there's something also in my own body that relaxes even more. So it's interesting. It's an interesting question. I don't know how that answer sounds, but I've no one's ever asked me that question. And so it's the first time that I'm sort of trying to articulate it. Um, yeah, that's what I would say.
Well, thank you for your time tonight. Thank you for the years of work that have gone into these ideas. And thank you for penning this wonderful book. I know that I feel better for having read it, truly. And it is going to be on my gift list to several loved ones this year,
Mm,
sincerely. So, thank you. Is there any way that our listeners can connect with you if they are interested in learning more about your work, purchasing the Nature Embedded Mind, or learning more about Elemental?
yep. You can always connect with me through the website, Experience Elemental. If you want a book, there are books in our little shop. You can also get the book wherever you like to get books. That's fine. It's, all over. Um, Text me. Like, I really feel at this
This
point,
is very generous.
yeah, but at this point, I'm serious. I feel like ask me. I'm in a position where I will be happy to answer anything. But I think it's sort of like the book is an introduction, and the rerouting cohort is more of a deeper. Some of the things that I do are online or hybrid. So if people are away from Los Angeles, yes, there are ways to do this with me. Um, and if you're in LA, you can always, come in person to what we're doing. But yeah, I really do feel like let's just connect. And if that's a text, it's a text.
Well, thank you so much for
Yeah.
your time tonight.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.